Welcome to our Tech Tuesday monthly webinar, everyone. My name is Candy Mitchell, and I'm the Director of Digital Marketing here at CoreTech, and I'm also your host today. Presenting on our Azure Purview topic is Senior Solutions Architect Chris Shalda. You can see him there on the screen. And I know we promised our Azure Practice Director Clint Atkins would be here as well, but he's a busy guy, got tied up in customer meetings, so he is not here this afternoon. But Chris is very capable, and we're excited to have him do this. So before we start, just a couple of administrative items. We do have a Q&A and feature enabled today. So if you have any questions, you can drop them up there in the chat, and we'll answer them at the end of the webinar. And we are recording, so the webinar link and the presentation deck will be sent out after the event is over. So I think that's pretty much it. Chris, you ready to go?
Sure thing.
All righty.
Do this. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining. Just a little bit about me before we get started. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Chris Shalda. I'm our Senior Solutions Architect for Cloud Solutions at CoreTech. I focus on a lot of different areas for our customers. A lot of it these days is in Azure, across infrastructure, applications, and data. I also help with Microsoft 365 and the modern workplace type of services. And what I'm finding these days, I'm working a lot more in the data side of Azure, as a lot of our customers have a lot of data that they're dealing with, and they're trying to figure out what to do with all that data, how to get the most out of that data, and then also like how to secure that, how to govern that data, which is becoming bigger and bigger topics these days as there's more compliance regulations that our customers have to deal with. Just keeping track of that as the data kind of is starting to explode really with all of our customers. So hopefully this will be very relevant to you as well, as I'm sure many of you have a lot of data in your organization. You may not know where is it exactly, what does it have, what type of data is exactly in it, how do we keep track of it, how do we ensure things are being used properly. That's what we're going to get into today, making sure you're maximizing the value of the data in the cloud. And really what we're showcasing is Azure Purview is a relatively new service that Microsoft released in, it was October of 2021. So they was in preview for quite a while. It's a pretty robust service. I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you, seeing where it might fit for your organization. So what we're really going to talk about today is going to be really how Purview helps you bridge that gap between the IT side of the business and just like IT and the business side, right? Because sometimes there's a little bit of a divide there, especially when it comes down to data. And so we'll show you what, this can provide a dictionary of knowledge around the data that you have, kind of like a data catalog, if you will, the ability to provide a semantic search over all of the metadata tied to the data which you can create. We'll show you how that works, how you can navigate the data lineage and the relationships of the data so you know where the data is coming from, the insights as well into the location and movement of all that sensitive data, and overall just how you can use Azure Purview to improve your overall data governance. So let's get started. So interesting stats here around data. The data governance itself is about ensuring that data being used in your core business operations, your reports, analyses, that it's discoverable, accurately defined, and it's totally trusted and can be protected. But really, the data governance has become an increasingly important aspect to a business because, really, according to a prediction from IDC, digital data expected to grow approximately 175 zettabytes, that's with a Z, right, by 2025. So as much as data has been growing recently, it's expected to exponentially continue to grow. So the more data we have, the harder it is to govern that data. I think is basically the premise of what we're going to be talking about today. The other thing that's really interesting too is just how managing the data and the compliance of that data is becoming kind of interdisciplinary. And as a data professional in charge of managing all that influx data, right? Maybe you do that or someone else in your organization. Are you prepared to answer questions like, where did my organization's data come from? Or is the access and the usage of that data by different departments compliant? And maybe what regulatory requirements govern that data, right? The number and types of data sources are also just multiplying. The data may be stored maybe on-prem, across different public clouds. It could even be in a multitude of software as a service, or also known as SaaS applications. And tracking all this data manually in Excel or in another spreadsheet, right, it's difficult to begin with, but it will become increasingly difficult and cumbersome to deal with. An organization that doesn't have an automated and holistic understanding of its entire data estate across these different sources will really find it increasingly challenging to adapt quickly to the changing market and the regulatory conditions you may be facing. So let's talk about, what are the aspects of how you would get to a successful data governance program. And there's many reasons why data governance is needed. These include the need to govern the data to maintain its quality, as well as a need to protect it. This entails a prerequisite need to discover the data in your organization with cataloging, scanning, and then classifying your data to support this protection here. And this will also drive, this is another side of this too, is not just data governance in terms of the compliance and the security aspects, right? And just reducing risk, but the other aspect here is you'll be able to enable all of your data consumers to easily find the data assets that they need to drive agility within the organization. So you get those kind of things together for all aspects of who's consuming the data versus who's governing the data. So what we're going to do here is talk about how you can reimagine this data governance with Azure Purview. So where Azure Purview comes into play, it enables what's called a unified data governance, which means not having to have a lot of different point solutions in order to get your hand around what data you have and how to classify and protect it. You can get more from data sources with Microsoft Azure Purview, as it's a fully managed cloud service, and it serves as a system for registration and system discovery for enterprise data sources. And those include, like I mentioned before, on-prem data sources, and also those that might be in a public cloud or in SaaS solutions. Not just Microsoft first-party data sources, like you might be thinking, oh, this only works for SQL. No, it goes way beyond that. We'll show you all the different options that are available today and are coming. It provides the capability that enables any users, from analysts to data scientists and developers, to register, discover, understand, and then consume those enterprise data sources. So here's the unified approach to data governance from Microsoft. The foundation of Purview is the Purview platform. It automates the data discovery by providing data scanning and classification for all the data assets across your entire data estate. So what this does, it can eliminate all those manual and error-prone processes you'd otherwise have to use to just figure out the data that you have and what it does. Then all the descriptions of your data assets, as well as the relationships, are automatically integrated into a holistic map of your data estate. Built on top of that data map there's an app for data governance, there's a data catalog, and data insights. So what this means is that all the data governance apps, as they call them, they'll have a real-time understanding of all the data across your data estate, because these all integrate in a unified fashion. So let's start breaking down some of these pieces here. So we're managing the data governance in the cloud. I mean, you are able to manage multiple types of data, whether it's just operational data, transactional, analytical data. This is a cloud native service that's just really purpose built for this capabilities here around discovering data compliance needs. It is fully managed, so consider it a PaaS service or platform as a service. There are no servers for you to manage to keep this up and running. And this eliminates all those manual processes and ad hoc type of solutions that you might have to have put in place otherwise to help get your hand around data governance. Now, establishing the foundation for effective data governance, that requires you need to discover all of the data. Now, Purview allows you to do this in an automated way. It also allows you to set up rules, a lot of built-in rules in terms of classifying data at scale. You can create custom rules as well too, to specify the different types of data that you have in your environment might be unique. And then specify the sensitivity, the compliance, the industry, business, company specific values of those types of data, just in line in the views that you'll see here in Azure Purview. And you'll know exactly where the data came from and what was derived from it with its data lineage, so that you can know that you can trust the data that you're seeing. Then we go to maximizing the business value of that data. So once we have all the data mapped and it's classified, you can really allow all of those users, the data kind of consumers, if you will, to find the data that they need to find based off of different potential glossary terms or just the type of the data that's pulled from a classification perspective, all from a data catalog. And you can do a lot of easily finding that data with semantic search, and then you can drill down into that data and understand its lineage, its sensitivity, and basically you can create a consistent glossary of business terms and definitions that you may use in your organization overall and apply that to the data so that it's easily classified, understood what somebody might be looking at or looking for that particular type of data once you have that glossary established. Then beyond that, you'll be able to gain the insights into data across the entire estate. So that means is that you can look at just kind of at a glance, how is your data being used? How's it being created across the entire data estate? You can assess all of these data assets in a visual way, and then looking at it from breaking it down from how are the business glossary terms being used, how is sensitive data being used, just as a kind of overall as a whole, and being able to drill down as well too to get more details. So this is kind of a way you can look at it. In the middle is how Purview works. It's the data map is really the heart of everything. It's pulling all that data and understanding all the data sources that you have. The data itself doesn't actually get pulled into Purview, if you will. It's really it's the information about the data. So it's creating all those metadata kind of fields around the data. So in some ways it's secure in that way where you're not actually able to see any of the data when you're in Purview, which I'll show you. We're going to have a demo a little bit later on that. And that pulls it in from on-prem, multi-cloud, right, SaaS. And then from there, it builds a data catalog so that your data consumers can find the different data sources and assets that you have in a quick and easy way. On top of that, has a data insights where more of the organization, probably on a regulatory side or management side of your data, can look at everything as a whole and get insights from how the data is being used and accessed. So here's a little bit of view of what the data map looks like. So you basically would take, after these, you set up these scans, and ideally set up automatic scans to run on a certain interval to pick up anything new that comes into those those data sources. And you would put them into different collections, and those collections could be based off of different locations, right? Like here it's showing North American or European data center. It could be different departments or different types of projects. However you want to break those up into collections. Then you can see all the different data assets within a collection, so you can quickly identify what you might be looking at and where it comes from there. And then using underneath the covers here, there's a number of built-in classifiers, over 200 plus. So they're finding different patterns of the data. So it might be driver's license number, it might be a first name, it might be a email address, right? And you can also create your own patterns from your own custom classifiers, so you can know what type of data is in each of the assets. And then the support is for 35 data sources and growing, which actually covers a wide breadth of actual data sources that are out there today. Probably your most popular ones, if you were to look at that. We'll take a look at that a little later in our demo. And Microsoft's continually adding on to this. So think of this, and this is a cloud service. So one of the biggest advantages of utilizing cloud service like this, especially for Microsoft, is that Microsoft's continually developing and adding new features to this. So you're getting more and more value, and more times than not, you're not actually paying anything additional for it, for that additional value there. And now, then, after you have the data map all set, right, this is where you can get the discovery through the Purview, the data catalog. You'll see there that's a semantic search where you just kind of can put in, casual search terms, right, to find the data. It does a lot of kind of related searches and relevant searching, so that you can find things that are kind of like near what you're looking for, instead of it being kind of only exactly the wording that you're using. So it makes it very simple for those data consumers to find the data that they're looking for, or for maybe on the compliance side to find where there are specific types of sensitive data that you want to see across the data estate. And this allows you to also search for business glossary terms. And after you click into here, into finding the assets you need, you'll be able to see the data lineage, owners, transformations, life cycle of that data from that assets perspective. And after that point, this is where you see the data insights. This is where you get reports on the different assets, the scans, which ones, how often are you scanning, seeing how glossary terms are being used, how many classifications, like how many instances of a driver's license number are you seeing within certain assets or collections that you have. And then labels for sensitivity labeling. And sensitivity labeling is more to do with you're applying information protection typically to, it might be an entire column in a table. There might be files. This is not just for structured databases. This could be for unstructured data as well as files, where you can pull all that information in. And the Microsoft sensitivity labels really tie into it. If you're familiar with Azure Information Protection, it's those same type of labels that work in context of Azure Purview. And you can actually apply labels from Purview based off of patterns that you set and the type of data that you see. You can actually, it's not just a one-way street where just the metadata is getting pulled into Azure Purview. There are some things you can do to push out policies into the data sources, like you would if you were kind of on the security side of the compliance side. You want to push those sensitivity labels in because, hey, we found some fields here that are, tax IDs or social security numbers or something like that, and we know those are sensitive, but now we want to apply some policies to them to ensure that they can only be used within the context of those policies. So that's where it really starts getting a little more advanced, right? In terms of not just seeing the data and knowing what's there, but now you can apply policies beyond that. So another view here about kind of the experience here about the different roles that you might have in your organization and the things that they kind of really care about. And the first you have there is the data producers and consumers, right? They're going to care most about the data catalog. Maybe it's data sharing. You can also put policies around data sharing from Azure Purview and see from a high level also, right? How is data sharing actually being used within the organization when you're more on the data officer side? Then you get to the data engineers and your subject matter experts. They're going to care about that data quality, kind of the master data management, right? That's where they're going to kind of focus in on, and that's where Purview can help there too. And on the right side is data officers. They're going to probably be most concerned about the data use governance, data privacy. This is really where data loss prevention comes into play and applying those sensitivity labels and ensuring the data is being used in a proper way that just adheres to business policies. And so when you look at this from different options that are available, this is just a handful of the top options. See on the left side, that's going to be a lot of your Azure offerings, right? Because we see like data lake service, blobs, those are storage blobs, Cosmos DB, SQL DB, right? Azure files, kind of usual suspects, as well as SQL Server on, on a VM or physical server on-prem, right? Power BI, it can actually pull data kind of in from Power BI as far as what types of reports and dashboards that you're setting up there, and then how does that data even line up with all of the data sources and assets that you have otherwise in Purview. And then you also have the ability to hook up to non-Azure clouds. So you're seeing things like AWS S3 and their RDS, which is their relational database service, so kind of like think SQL there, IBM Cloud, Oracle, Google Cloud, Alibaba Cloud, right? Microsoft, if you haven't been watching, right, what they've been doing lately, they're really starting to become more, inclusive of a lot of these other offerings that aren't theirs, because they're really seeing the value of, these services are only going to be valuable if you can pull in all the data of all the different areas that where you're storing the data. And Microsoft doesn't just expect you to move everything into Azure, because that's the only place that it's valuable. So that's really I like the direction Microsoft's going there, because it's not forcing you to utilize their data source services. If you decide to, great, but you can still take advantage of products like Azure Purview for other types of data sources and assets, no matter where they're stored. To give you an idea of kind of the features here that are already available, GA means generally available, versus some that are in preview right now that you can try out. That's showing in the right-hand column there. just take a look at that. There's a lot of stuff available today. I'll be showing a couple of the preview features a little bit here today too in the demo. But just to kind of sum up before we go into the demo, the idea of Azure Purview, right, is it helps to answer the who, what, when, and how and where, as well as why of the data present, and not only a data lake, but also other data sources. And it brings the data closer to the user. So when your organization moves away from a centralized to a self-service analytics, the value of the data lake is unlocked, and the digital feedback loop empowers employees to make data-driven decisions. They'll determine the success in the coming decade. And one of the key services that will unblock self-service analytics in your organization is Azure Purview. So with that being said, we're going to get into the demo here. So I have just kind of a basic demo environment set up, and not a whole bunch of stuff in there, but just kind of to show get you familiar with what it looks like as far as the interface and some of the things and of what you can see there. So we started off here. This is just, we got to hear from the Microsoft Azure portal, and this is Purview's own kind of dashboard, if you will, here. And you'll see there's a number of options on the left side here. We're going to start with the data catalog. So this is probably going to be more for your data consumers and producers, trying to kind of find the assets, find what they're looking for here, right? This is where that search is, where we can put in things like email, right? I want to see something email. Okay, outgoing email, list email, email message, right? I can pull in, look at some of these asset sources here. There's also other search suggestions. I said like revenue. I don't know if that one's going to work here. I have some glossary terms in here too, but essentially you can search or you can just browse the assets. You can see how many sources you're connected, how many assets total, how many glossary terms. Let's just jump into browsing assets. So I can see already I have some options between some collections, or I can look at different source types. So you can see I have different source types here from Azure Cosmos DB, Data Lake on Azure, Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Server, storage accounts, and even Salesforce, right? So that's outside of even Azure. I can look into my collections, and I can see, oh, look, I have a number of 1,800 results, because these are the different data assets. So you can think of a lot of these as they'd essentially be like a column, essentially in a table, if you're thinking a relational database, right? And we can dive in, we can narrow down what we want to look for here. If there's specific classification, it's already pulling some things out, like we said, email address before, right? Where are their email addresses? Okay, so there's this address book container. There's also a customer, how it looks like, table here in SQL. So if I click into there, I can then see things like, all right, if we had a description, it would be here. If there's any sort of classifications, it'd be there. These are schema classifications, so based off of a specific column. So it already found automatically some things like email address, person's name, US phone number in this table. We can see the hierarchy of where this is. So this is, in the sales LT schema, this is underneath a specific database and a specific server. So we can see that. If there's any glossary terms tied to the asset, we'd be seeing that there. Then we can see properties. So we could show the different properties of that table there, the schema. So really this comes down to the different column names, right? What classifications, if there are any sensitivity labels or glossary terms, the type of data, data types here. This is all pulled in. So lineage, we don't have a real big we don't have a hierarchy here in pulling data from source to source. So I'm not having a lineage, doesn't show up for this. If there are any contacts, you would be able to set these contacts as well too. I'll show you how to do that. So that if somebody's like, hey, I think this would be useful for me, but I want to know more about it, or I just need to understand what this data really relates to, you may be able to identify, the experts or the different owners for the data, so that somebody could get in contact with them. You can also see what else might be related. In this case, it's just other Azure SQL tables within this database. And if we look at this from I was saying like context, we can go to edit here. So depending on the role that you have, you can be kind of a reader only. You could have the ability to modify or edit different information here to enrich the data that we're pulling together. So you can add users or groups, right? This is based off of Azure AD here, so that somebody could have like a direct email, to an email address to the person that's going to be under experts or owners, for example. You can kind of change things around the classifications, adding glossary terms, descriptions from a schema perspective, changing the overall information about what we were looking at here. I'm going to cancel this and then go into schema. So let's take a look at, we were talking email address, right? So I'm going to click email address. Now we're getting into a column level. So from here, again, you can see classifications here, properties wise. Now we can see, right, individual, information about the actual properties of that data field. Again, if we have contacts that are specific to this data field as opposed to, higher up in the stack here, we can set inheritance and those types of things too, but giving people an ability to find people that would be able to help them with that information. So this is showing you a way that you can kind of dig into each asset, being able to browse through all different assets, having different filters here, and using the search as well to basically find what you're looking for as far as data is concerned, right? Now go back to the data catalog here. We can look at the glossary. I don't have a lot in here right now, but I created a glossary term just for the demo here. Essentially what you do is you would create glossary terms, or you would actually be able to import terms. So if you already have glossary terms from a business kind of definition perspective, you can import those terms directly into here, making it super easy to get them established. You can create new terms. So basically that's what I did with the revenue. You can use different templates. Basically, I'm going to show you what the system default template is. You can create a new term template, meaning there's different fields for the glossary terms, different type of information that you might want to capture for each of those, so that that's all searchable. In this case, I'm going to say system default. And then here, let's just call this, right? Well, let's call it something like, I don't know, like profits, right? And then we can call this, this is sales profits. And the parent, we can put it underneath revenue to parent these different glossary terms. We can add additional, you can add acronyms here, multiple acronyms. We can add resources, so links to resources so that people can understand what those glossary terms are. We can see other synonyms. Maybe somebody, this doesn't really apply here, but revenue might be a synonym here. Other related terms, I'd say revenue is a related term. And then set your contacts of who's the experts around these, and then who are the stewards, the people who define the standards for a data object or the business terms. They drive the quality of the standards, right? Those would be the stewards. I can just hit create here. Just like that, I have another term here. And all this information shows here. You can see the related terms, if there's any children to that term, contacts and such. And there's different, you can set it as a draft, as it needs approval, or it's approved, or it's expired. There's ways that you can have there's life cycle around these terms as well too. And we'll see from profits is underneath revenue now, right? And you can apply these then to the different types of data that you have. When we're in those different data assets, you can bulk apply these to different to across multiple assets or individually. So that just kind of gives you an idea there. Different views, a list view and hierarchical view. So the glossary terms can be used in a number of ways within this too. Now we get to the data map. So the data map actually is probably where you would start, because you have to actually pull some data in before you can do anything. So what we start with is sources. What we see here is this is just a root collection, and I have some sources in here that I've registered. You can see these look similar to what we were looking at before as the types of sources: Cosmos DB, Data Lake, SQL Database, Salesforce. I haven't pulled in a Power BI as like a sample here. And this is like all visual. You can expand it and collapse it, those types of things. So you can get, see what you're looking for here. Put in filter by keywords so that you can get down to specific things. Maybe you're looking for Salesforce and it's in multiple collections, for example. And so this is where you really start, is registering data sources. So let's just kind of go through what that flow looks like. This is where you're going to see all the different types of data sources that you can pull from. You'll see here they're all kind of broken up by Azure database, file, services, and apps. So let's just start with Azure, right? Pretty much all the data services you can think of in Azure. Pretty much all those are going to be able to be pulled in to Azure Purview. Look at databases, number of different types of database. You only see that one of these is SQL down here. Number of other things like Salesforce is something that we're using here. SAP, Oracle, Amazon, Cassandra. There's a number of things here. Files you can pull directly in from an AWS account or Amazon S3. Other services and apps, kind of think like SaaS services, so SAP HANA, Looker, pull in from Power BI as well too. And these sources they're expanding, ongoing. Microsoft is continuing to add more and more here. So you'd pull in like a source here, let's just say, but if you look at Azure here, there's multiple options. You'd select a management group, a subscription, and then say, yep, I want to register that. Now there are some specific things that you have to set up already. In Azure, it's a little bit easier because you might already have the permissions already kind of set. For others, you're going to have to set up some sort of credentials so that you can connect to those other services, and put in some different information depending on what you're looking at here. So let's just dig into one of these guys here. So from like a Salesforce perspective, nope, not that one. It'd be, let's view the details. You can see that there's different scans that have been ran here, how many discovered assets within this particular asset, and you can actually create new scans. You can edit the source even at that point, if like where you're connecting to. And this just gives you kind of a high level. There's not like a lot that you can do in here, but this is just to give you a high level of each of the assets that you have. Now again, the collections. So we had a couple collections, like there's 5 sources in that one collection. There was one source in we don't have any sources set up in that other collection called Cosmos Purview. But you can see kind of hierarchically what these are. You can set the role assignments here based off of what kind of rights you want for this collection. So think of this as a way that you're really setting the permissions at a top level here for that collection. So that's another way you can think of kind of organizing these data assets in terms of the types of roles, the people that would have access to read things or actually edit some of the metadata in here, or even push back things into the original data sources. So that's a view there. We have scan rule sets. So these are different rule sets that Microsoft out of the box created for you. And these are for different source types here in order to essentially determine what type of things they're scanning for. So let's click on one of these guys here. So Azure SQL Database. There are 206 system rules that are identified here. You'll see a lot of these are worldwide type of things, government related here for a bunch of different countries, and every country has a different way of showing, national identification numbers, passport numbers, driver's license numbers, right? So all these patterns are already built in. You can identify those automatically. Financial wise, routing numbers, bank numbers, those types of things. Personal identifiable information, right? Security wise, it's maybe common passwords, miscellaneous IP addresses. So we just, these are just the custom rule or the built-in default rule sets that are here. We can create custom ones too. So I created one called custom rules. I added something called a sales order rule to this, which would identify a sales order based off a certain pattern of characters in there. So I'm including everything, system rules plus the sales order rule here. And that's when you select a scan, you then say, I want to use these scan rules. So that's why you would select those rules specifically. And it's based on the source type that you're looking for. So you can customize those. You can also look at patterns. I don't have anything right here right now, but this is essentially something that you would look for of assets that are grouped as resource sets, and creating patterns to identify what those look like. So this is very useful, especially like in let's say data lake storage and a specific folder path, and then you would create configuration rules here to identify what data is that you're trying to create a pattern for, right? So that can be useful as well too. Integration runtimes is just showing any integration runtimes you may have that is basically that's used with Azure Data Factory to pull data in from other data sources. So it can kind of see that end-to-end view of everything. Then classifications, these are going to look just like those system rules a bit once it goes. This is kind of digging into what those scan rules were. These are a part of a scan rule. So these are the different classifications, like I showed you from different, things from different countries here, personal identifiable information, those types of things. You can create your own classification. So that's where I created one called a sales order, and basically can associate custom classification rules here. But where I did this also was in the classification rules, I said sales order rule, and I created an order pattern so that I could classify it specifically as, a sales order, right? Something that we'd be able to, a piece of information we'd be able to look for across all of our data assets. So that's just some ways that you can kind of classify, scan data, look for patterns, setting all that up so that it enriches the data that you're able to search for and browse for in the data catalog. Under data insights, this is under preview, so there's more to come here. But what this gives you is this is the insights over potentially all of the data state or what you have access to see here. And it gives you some information on the top level, right? Like overall sources, assets, classified assets. You can actually look at this from, different graphs here about, let's say email addresses, right? Where are those stored? Okay, we have something in Cosmos DB, we have something in Azure SQL database. If we were pulling in stuff about files, we could see the file extensions, any files that are not stored in resource sets. You can view details here, and everything is pretty much you can drill down into. Right? So that you're looking at what email address, we can look at the top file paths, the different assets here. Say, all right, I want to see this asset, and then look, it brought us back to that data catalog. Right? So we can drill in here just like we did earlier. So kind of useful to see an overall view there. Scans, it's just basically telling you, scans successful, failed, canceled. Just kind of an operational view there. Glossary will tell you about how many terms you have total, terms that have assets, terms that don't have assets. So like, are these being used or not? Anything that's incomplete, like right now, my terms are, we don't have any stewards or experts or definitions set up for them. So those are considered incomplete. So it's a way to kind of go in and identify basically, things that you need to enhance within your glossary to get more value out of it. Classifications, you can see then, this is kind of an interesting view because you can see everything that's been classified, look at the categories themselves, tables wise, how many tables have these different classifications. We can dig into the top classification categories. There's personal and government, view that. Say, all right, well, there's for personal data, that's in a couple subscriptions, couple tables. And then personal, you can drill down further. That's where we get all this information, drill right into the tables. Again, we're going to be back into the data catalog. Okay. And there's sensitivity labels. We don't have this set up yet. This is another preview feature here. This is where you would see once you apply labels, sensitivity labels to some of this data, whether that's outside of Purview or through Purview, you can then see how many assets are actually labeled and kind of how they're being used across the organization here. Data policies is the newer thing that's in preview here. This is something where you would be setting, this is kind of pushing policies into the data sources in a bit. So example policy might be, allow read on a data asset finance to the group of non-FTEs, right? Or if you want to have, allow, you want to maybe say, give the data, I guess it'd be kind of data security engineer, right? Access to specific data resources. And this might be something that has to do with I think we can drill into here a little bit. Let me see if I can. Not so much there. I could say the data lake. I don't have data sources in here right now, but basically, if you wanted to set it up for to give different users access to the information that they might not have otherwise, by having like direct access to the data sources, this would be a way that we could do that. So Microsoft's still working on this one, something just to keep your eye on. And then management here is just kind of setting up some of the configurations in here, setting up metrics. You can use Azure Monitor for operational alerts, looking at Data Factory, pulling that in, having that connected, then you can see what's happening in and out of Data Factory. Anything used with Azure Data Share, you can include here, so you can see how data is being shared through that feature. And then credentials is important. This is typically you're going to be using Key Vault here to store your credentials to talk to each of the different data sources, right? So in a very secured way. So Microsoft requires you to use Key Vault in order to store those credentials so that it can have the access it needs to pull the information into here. So that's just kind of a high-level overview here. Obviously, as you get more and more information here, it becomes richer and richer. But this is just pretty simple interface to use here. Hopefully that was helpful, at least to see a little bit more beyond just some screenshots, if you will. All right, so now we're complete with the demo. I'm like, well, okay, this sounds great. I like the idea of Purview. How would I even get started here, right? Well, we have an option where we can provide you with a quick start, is what we call it. It's about a 2 to 3 week engagement where we can accelerate you in terms of using Azure Purview, getting it set up, setting up some of the best practices so that you can start getting some and gaining some value from that. So we would essentially get this stood up in your environment. We'd run some workshops to make sure we understand what you would need, what we'd be connecting up to there, setting up some of the best practices, like I mentioned, to within Azure, so that setting up roles properly and your collections, helping you guide you through that, and basically setting up those scans and data discovery and showing you how to use some of these features kind of hands-on. So that's something we can provide for you. Definitely let us know if that's something that you're interested in. And then this is just some additional content too. If this was interesting information, we have a lot more content on our website, cortec.com. Previous webinars, some blog posts, as well as some downloads and white papers there too. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at that. Lots of different areas that we cover from our expertise. Hopefully some of that would be helpful for you as well too. So yeah, next steps, essentially, if you want to get help getting started with Azure Purview or really anything with Azure, feel free to give us a call, shoot us an email, visit our site. There's a contact form on there, cortec.com/contact. Be happy to hear from you, happy to have some conversations, see how we can help you along your cloud journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. That was a great webinar. I know everybody learned a lot. I know I did. Just a reminder, we will be emailing out the recording of the webinar as well as a copy of this slide deck for reference. And not to plug it too hard, but if you're interested in Azure Purview Quick Start that Chris just discussed, please reach out to us at cortec.com and we'll get you started. So thank you so much for attending, everybody, and have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.